Terrifier 2, the 2022 sequel to 2016's Terrifier. Written and directed by Damien Leone, in his own words, the Dream Warriors of the Terrifier franchise. In anticipation of the release of Terrifier 3 this week, I figured it's time to cover the Terrifier movies. Welcome back to Fright Club 2024 on the Ectoviolence channel. My name is Alec. Today we're talking Terrifier 2. These are movies that I wasn't super interested in originally. When the first Terrifier came out, I thought, oh great, another spooky clown, you know? I didn't think much of it. Until the hype for Terrifier 2 really came out and people were talking about how good it actually was. That's when I started to pay attention. Maybe this is something I should be interested in. Although, again, killer clowns, you know. I have the killer clowns from outer space and I have Pennywise, and I don't know if I have much more room for killer clowns in my life, you know what I mean? Surprise though, Art the Clown is pretty awesome. Now it depends on who you are. There are some people who really don't like these movies, they don't care for them. Maybe some of them really just don't care for the gore, or they just don't want to compare Art the Clown to their slasher icons from their childhood. But either way, let's go ahead and start with the positives of Terrifier 2. Now the cast and characters in this movie, flawless, awesome, no notes. Art the Clown and Sienna Shaw are carrying this movie on their backs. They do a great job. I mean, honestly, to do a 2.5-hour slasher movie and to be able to get through that, you need to care about the characters. Because at some point, a lot of people are just going to tune out. Not me, though. I was actually glued to this, and I thought it could go on longer. I was like, I know this is 2.5 hours, but is this going to feel like 2.5 hours? Is it going to feel like 3? Is it going to feel shorter? The music for this movie, awesome. Again, I really like the music they had going in the original Terrifier. It had a very groundhouse feel to it. There's a lot more synth music in this movie, and I'm a huge synth music nerd. I own several vintage synthesizers, you know what I mean? Like, that's the level of nerd I'm talking about. So, the soundtrack being heavy synthy in this one is... thank you. Now let's talk about some of the kills. Obviously, these are all going to go in the positive section, but off the top of my head, the most iconic one is obviously going to be that torture scene in the bedroom. Now, it's just very fucked up to watch. This is clearly the most fucked up scene I've seen with Art the Clown. Now, obviously, the Saw scene in the first movie is horrific, right? Messed up. But this scene is just, it shows more, you know what I mean? The torture that girl is going through is absolutely terrifying. It's horrific. And the practical effects of it, that's why it's so unsettling. Because, you know, they could have CGI'd this and it just would have not had the same feel at all. But the practical effects of the flesh crushing and the blood squirting, I mean, even the guts that they're pouring out in some scenes, you know what I mean? It's all executed just the way you want it to be. At some points, you might find this movie hard to look at. You might be looking away a little bit. Really depends on the kind of horror fan you are, if you're a fan of. Now, you can tell this movie has a lot higher budget, partially because of the practical effects and the elaborate, weird sets and scenes, but also just the lighting. The lighting in this movie is something I haven't seen a lot of people talk about, but from Terrifier to Terrifier 2, it is a huge upgrade. All the scenes with bisexual lighting, like unintentionally, I think, but it works. Anytime you have weird and colorful scenes and like red and blue lighting, it just works for me. The fact that this was an Indiegogo campaign that was trying to raise $50,000 and went on to raise $250,000. Like, honestly, I'm really stoked that happened for this. It's an interesting new horror franchise. This is probably a lot of people's most anticipated horror movie of this year, and I speak of Terrifier 3. Like, you'll see Art the Clown next to Freddy Krueger, Jason Voorhees, on all the racks at Spirit Halloween, you know what I mean? It's crazy, and I'm super happy for the filmmakers of this movie. I really like the opening scene. I compare it to the opening of Dream Warriors, honestly, when she's constructing that house in Dream Warriors. And in this one, she's constructing her little outfit that's based on the sketches from her dad's notebook and her dad's character. And the construction of that outfit is very interesting. I like seeing just something weird and unique like that thrown in there for us people who do stuff like that in our spare times. Now, I've never done a cosplay outfit that elaborate, but and like her brother, there's plenty of people out there obsessed with true crime. I think a lot of that stuff is really interesting. This kid in this movie reminded me a lot of the first season of Chucky. That was the vibes I was getting in this movie. And I really liked Chucky, the series, all right? So now if we want to talk about the negatives of Terrifier 2, I'm not going to have many. The big one that's going to be discussed for most people with the negatives of this movie is probably the length. I think there are things you possibly could have cut out. You could have made this movie shorter for sure. But this is essentially the director's cut. Like, this is the full fucking version. You can't get a director's cut because this is it, baby. In slasher movies, I get it. It's common to just move on from the last movie's people kind of immediately. And then sometimes they end up in the next movie, you know? So it's going to be interesting to see Terrifier 3. Honestly, any other negatives? I see this movie could be hard to watch if you're really not into the gore stuff. There's lots of blood and it's brutal as hell. And before I rate this movie, why don't you go ahead and jump in the comments down below. Let me know what you thought of Terrifier 2 and if you're excited for Terrifier 3 this week. I'm going to give Terrifier 2 a 4 out of 5 hearts. It is definitely excellent. This is clearly one of the best horror movies of the last decade, especially slasher movies. Especially if you are someone who yearns for the 80s slasher movies that were all. If you like this video, be sure to check out this one and hit that subscribe button. Happy Halloween.